Hello, my name is Mike Zahari. I'm at the Church of Scientology, Mission of Riverdale, 308 Broadview, and today's lecture or sermon is number 62, and it's the topic today is communication is life. Now, we're going to be doing this sermon out of the Scientology Handbook, Chapter 5, which is the whole area about communication. I will give examples as we go along so that you can see how this would apply to your life and everybody else's life at the same time. Communication is an interesting subject in that everybody communicates or appears to, and when you have a newborn or somebody who's just been born and learning, growing, one of the things you're constantly trying to do is get them to communicate the way that you communicate. And it's not to say that they're not communicating, they're just not communicating the same as you're communicating. And when they start to get the labels for things around them, then you're now on an agreement. Now, if we fast forward that into later on in life, we have two individuals who apparently have the same agreements about things as what they see around them, and they communicate with their agreement, but the agreements aren't always the same. What you see and what the next person sees isn't always the same. So you're starting from different places when you're communicating, but you don't always look at that and you make assumptions. You make assumptions that the other person must obviously understand and know where you're coming from to understand your argument or your way of thinking. And they, on the other hand, have the same viewpoint, and they don't mesh. They don't mesh at all. They off altogether, clash, whatever. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today on the area of communication. All right, here we go. Communication is life. One's ability to communicate can spell the difference between success or failure in all aspects of living. You will notice that those people You will notice that those people you know who are successful in their endeavors generally have a high ability to communicate. Those who are not, do not. Communication is not just a way of getting along in life. It is the heart of life. It is by thousands of percent the senior factor in understanding life and living in it successfully. We instinctively revere, which means to hold in a higher place or higher status, the great artist, painter, or musician, and society as a whole looks upon them as not quite ordinary beings. And they are not. But the understanding and skilled use of communication is not only for the artist, it is for anyone. Now, when we're talking art or we're talking music, those sorts of the area of the aesthetics, there is a communication going on. It's a perception of what it is that they saw and how they represent it to present it to you, to show you their viewpoint on things. So when we talk about communication, don't only think of it this way as the spoken word. There are many, many levels of communication. There's emotional tones, there's posture, there's the way that somebody pays attention. There's many, many different factors involved, along with how much is somebody putting their attention on something else while they're communicating. There's nothing worse than talking to somebody who's thinking of something else or playing some game in their head while you're trying to communicate to them, because you're only communicating to a little teeny tiny part of their attention. You need to talk to more of their attention, and they, as the individual listening, need to have more of their attention available to listen. Some people don't have much attention. Some people have their attention on a lot of things in life, and it's very trying for them to put their attention on one thing and stick to it long enough. And that shows itself in business, that shows itself in life, where they just get sidetracked too easily, or they can't stay on a given course for any length of time. And that's a discipline. That's something that you need to sort away, whether it be finding out whatever it is your attention's on and resolve those issues so that you can be more here and now doing what you're supposed to do. but it is always, it's communication. It's the flow of ideas back and forth. Okay? I'll continue. In examining the whole subject of communication, one is apt to discover, likely, apt to discover, if he takes a penetrating look, that there are very few people around him who are actually communicating. I'll explain that in a second. But that there are a lot of people who think they are communicating who are not. Now, you've probably run into this. There's a couple different ways of looking at this. This is the person who's just talking. And if you think of, say, a teacher in a classroom, so you have 20, 30 students in a classroom. Now, ideally, what should be occurring is the teacher has an idea, whether he got it from a book or from his own knowledge, and he's conveying it across to the students. So that would be the ideal scene. And the students, paying attention to the teacher, would receive the idea, look at it, inspect it for its worth, relative workability, does it fit in with their way of thinking, and then either make it their own, ask questions about it, tweak it, something it. That would be a communication. And if they had questions, then they would feel okay to ask questions back to the teacher. And that would be a two-way communication. But more often than not, you have a teacher or you have a politician who's just talking to bodies. No one in particular, he's just talking. And there's noise coming out, and whether it's being received by anybody is anybody's guess. Some may, some no, some won't. Some are receiving it completely differently. Some are receiving it not at all, but they're there, and they have the appearance of looking, and they have the appearance of listening, and they have the appearance of understanding, until you ask them what it is that was said. At which point you find out there was no communication. It didn't occur. It didn't occur. So this can happen, as I gave in the example of a teacher or a politician, but it can also happen, say, as a child. So you have a child and he's talking about, he's read Harry Potter, or he's into dragons, or he's into being a knight, or he's into, being something, a wizard, Doctor Strange, and he's creating things in life, and to him they're real. It's illusion. For him. It doesn't mean that it's not correct, or it's not even real for him. It is real for him. And he's creating these things, and he's telling you about them, and you're very practical, and you're very down to earth, and you don't have anything to do with those sorts of things, illusion or creation of mysterious and unusual things. So you just shut it right off. So there's no communication there. There's no reality from the child to you that you can communicate back to him about. So maybe he's Sir Galahad, and maybe he's on some charger, white horse, riding whatever, and you're right in there with him, and you're talking about, well, what did it feel like, and what did you do next, dude? Now there's reality, and it's all illusion. It's all illusion, and one could argue that maybe all life is just that. It's your take on what it is that's there. It's an illusion. Maybe it's not even real ever for people. Maybe they're constantly in an illusion. But unless you're willing to understand the other person's viewpoint and to understand where it is that they're coming from, or their version of the illusion, you're not on common ground to communicate. It's not communication. It's not the interchange of ideas. And that's really what we're talking about. It's the interchange of ideas. It's not the enforcement of an idea. It's the interchange of understanding of an idea. Could it be used by you or not? Is it something that you could relate to, have fun with? If it is, fantastic. Carry on. You're in more communication. If it's something that's completely outside of your sphere of influence or reality, you shut it off, communication ends. And the child or whoever goes away and finds somebody else to talk to. That's the way life seems to go. I'll carry on. The appearance sometimes is that it is better not to communicate than to communicate. But that is never really the case. Communication is the solvent for any human problem. An understanding of communication itself was not available before Scientology. Now, this is an interesting paragraph here. Because if we take two people, say, who are in an argument over something, and we cut right down to, well, why are they in an argument? It must be over something. There's a clash of opinion or a clash of ideas about something. And if each of the individuals is willing to understand the other person's viewpoint, not agree, just understand, and there's a difference here. If you're willing to understand where the other person is coming from, then you can understand their rationale for why it is that they're acting that way or thinking that way or talking that way. You don't necessarily have to agree with it. But if you duplicate it, then you can understand where they're coming from, and there's less animosity about it. Because you can now appreciate that person's rationale for what it is that he's doing. Because I'll be honest with you, if you've done this, every person you've ever talked to, you had an argument with, is completely convinced that his side of the argument is correct. And it is for him, based on what it is that he's operating on. He may not have all the information. He may have more information than you do. Maybe you're the one that's wrong. You don't know. But it's an interchange of ideas in communication that resolves the ridge or the barrier, the two ideas clashing each other against each other and not allowing the idea to flow. That's what it is you're trying to resolve, and you only resolve it by more communication, not less communication, and whatever that form is. Okay? All right. Communication is life. Without it, we are dead to all. To the degree we can communicate, we are alive. All right? So I'm going to finish here with the Creed of the Church. All right. The Creed of the Church of Scientology. We of the Church believe that all men of whatever race, color, or creed were created with equal rights. That all men have inalienable rights to their own religious practices and their performance. That all men have inalienable rights to their own lives. That all men have inalienable rights to their sanity. That all men have inalienable rights to their own defense. That all men have inalienable rights to conceive, choose, assist, or support their own organizations, churches, and governments. Now, all of what it is that I've just said to you right here depends hugely on communication. And it depends hugely on self-determinism and your ability to make choices for yourself by finding out information and using it to further your survival and the survival of those around you. But it's communication that allows these things to occur. Whether they're there or they're not there or need to be fought for, it's still communication. You have to find out what is the scene and what it is that you need to do to correct it, to bring it to a better state. Okay? So it does relate to what we're talking about. I'll carry on. That all men have inalienable rights to think freely, to talk freely, to write freely their own opinions, and to counter or utter or write upon the opinions of others. Communication. That all men have inalienable rights to the creation of their own kind. That the souls of men have the rights of men. That the study of the mind and the healing of mentally caused ills should not be alienated from religion or condoned in non-religious fields. This particular point here is extremely important if one conceives he's a spiritual being. You have to address the problem of man's spirituality in a spiritual setting, as in, say, a religion. It's not a question of addressing a body by cutting a part out to correct something that's a spiritual source of a problem. That's why this is so important, is that the healing of these things, they need to be in the area of religion, and religion needs to acknowledge that that is their area. That's their area of expertise. And through time, they've been extremely good at it. I'll carry on. and that no agency less than God has the power to suspend or set aside these rights, overtly or covertly. And we of the church believe that man is basically good, and that he is seeking to survive, and that his survival depends upon himself and upon his fellows and his attainment of brotherhood with the universe. And we of the church believe that the laws of God forbid man to destroy his own kind, to destroy the sanity of another, to destroy or enslave another soul, to destroy or reduce the survival of one's companions or one's group. And we of the church believe that the spirit can be saved, that the spirit alone may save or heal the body. Thank you very much.